All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I'm Damon Pistolka, your host, and with me today, I've got Bill Palifka from Cymonix. Did I say it right? Cymonix?
Cymonix it is. And Damon, thanks for having me here today.
All right. Well, Bill, it's awesome to get you on because, first of all, I don't have a lot of people that talk about cybersecurity. I do once in a while, but not as often as I would like, but you have some really interesting background and some experience that I think it's going to be fun to share with people here. So let's start out with that. Kind of tell us about your background and how the heck did you get into cybersecurity?
Yeah, I don't know how much time we have. I mean, the truth is I took a really untraditional path into getting into cybersecurity.
Yeah.
I started off originally as a banker. So, I worked out at JP Morgan. I was doing mid-market analysis. And then, I used the National Guard to pay for my education. And back in 2002, the Guard called me up, and I actually spent a lot of time over in Iraq. And so my unit got activated. I was a combat engineer. I was doing logistics planning. I've always liked technology and played around with a lot of systems. And when I got back home, my heart wasn't in it to go back into the banking world. And so I got involved in technology companies. And I started building websites. I started building BI reporting system, and it just kept evolving. And eventually, I got part of a team, and we were building applications, mostly in the healthcare industry, and security was really a big concern. And I think when we were building these companies up, we always felt like we were one data breach away from being out of business. And so we started developing our program. And, I think a lot of what we were doing was early DevSecOps. We didn't call it DevSecOps back then. But today, I think most teams would call it DevSecOps. And, we just said, hey, I think a lot of people need these services. I hooked up with other friends who were in the cybersecurity community. And, we decided to launch Cymonix.
Yeah. All right. Cymonix. I didn't say it right, but I got close. There we go.
It's all good.
But you said something I think that's really relevant for people and hopefully the listeners. And by the way, if you're listening, just go ahead and give us a shout out where you're listening from. If there's any questions, go ahead and ask. But you said one thing, Bill, that I think that if people didn't just stop and think about this a little bit, they need to, because you said one data breach from being out of business. This, I think, is this is the statement when it comes around cybersecurity now in business. When you look at the pipeline name escapes me right now. You look at
Colonial
Garmin.
Pipeline.
Colonial Pipeline. You look at Garmin. You look at some of these other big companies, and then you look at what was the whole solar whatever that thing, SolarWinds thing. And okay, so those are big, high profile things that have money, but that have money to pay ransomware and have IT teams that can do these kind of things. But cybersecurity and ransomware and all other kinds of attacks on small businesses literally put them out of business.
Well, Damon, there's some research that's been done around this and track what happens to companies after they get breached. And for most small businesses, like in the SMB market, what happens is 67% of them post a breach, and within the next 9 months actually have to close their doors forever. And, the numbers are just startling when you hear it like that. And I had to do some double checks, and I had to call some friends up, and, the research is out there, but it's a frightening thing. And it's a shame because, Damon, I think what most people don't realize is that, hackers are looking for easy entry, right? And there's simple things that everybody can do, not expensive things that raise the cost of adversaries. And, it really can help protect your business. So, yeah,
that's awesome. So let's just start out. Cause I mean, you get to figure out or get to see what bad guys are trying to do a lot of things. So for me, the small business owner, I've got a $5 million manufacturing business or something like that. Who are the bad guys?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the industry, right? And there's there's different categories of people out there, right? You have your hobbyist that's just kind of playing around, and oops, by accident, they discover an open port, and they start, and before they know it, they're in deeper trouble, right? Then you kind of have your professional hackers, right? The ones that are out there trying to, make money, or maybe they have a cause behind that's, making them an activist. And then, the next category of bad guys really out there are kind of the well-funded nation states and criminal organizations. And, from that standpoint, often, there's a lot of us in the security industry, are tracking the persistent adversaries, right? The APT, we name them often, right? There's China, Russia, there's a host of criminal groups out there. And every one of them have different agendas.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. When you look at it that way, it's pretty daunting. But you say, there's some things, and we'll talk about later, some things that you can do to get in, to protect yourself, make it harder to get in. But what are they usually coming for? I mean, what are they usually trying to get from you? Say, I'm that same business owner again. What are they trying to do?
Yeah, and again, I think it depends a little bit. If you're a healthcare company, they might be trying to ransomware you. That might be the main objective. If you're a manufacturer company, it might have even more malicious intent, right? What we find often is in the manufacturing sector, they're not looking to just ransomware your system, right? They might have alternative motives and want to go further down, and they might want to just steal your intellectual property. And so they're just sitting on your network waiting and taking information, and that's their payoff. So again, I think it depends on what your business is, what your crown jewels are within inside of your business. How is that adversary going to monetize it? Is it going to be for money? Is it going to be for intellectual property theft so they can make money? Or is there a purpose behind it, right? Is there like an agenda that they're looking to do? So again, oftentimes when we're working with our customers is we help them understand what their profile fits, and then help them build their defenses around an adversary mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because it makes you think about it, right? Because you could have people on your systems today, and if you have proprietary information, right? And just say you were prolifically generating awesome and very valuable information. They could sit there and you not even know it for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And just take that information out the back door. You don't even know it, and use it to whatever means they want.
Well, Damon, just even a couple of years ago, it wasn't uncommon to see the sit time on people's networks be 300, 400 plus days, right?
Oh, really?
It was absolutely an area where, and I will say a lot of IT teams have made a lot of progress. The average sit time right now is usually around 40 to 60 days. I mean, different people say different numbers, but it's come down significantly. But if you think about that, if sitting there for 45 days, and what you can see when a business is running, right? Just think about all the emails you send out in a given day, all of the data that's moving around internally inside of your company. That's a long time.
Yeah. Well, and I have just probably not, it's certainly not an advanced example, but I have an example of a client that I worked with a couple of years ago that they somehow, the hackers got into the owner's email, and the owner was, as in many businesses, he made large wire transfers.
Sure.
He made large overseas wire transfers because they were buying product and reselling it and working with suppliers. Well, he got an email one day that said, we've changed banks. We need to change it to this account. And it was a hacker that sat there long enough to understand how the conversation went back and forth. It all looked legitimate, and he nearly lost, I forget, it was a couple $100,000 doing that. And it wasn't in a huge business, but it happens in so many different ways. And it does we went back and looked at the email, we looked at things around it. It was very hard to tell. It's very hard to tell.
And that's it. And the truth is adversaries, hackers, they've all become very sophisticated, right? And they're prying on human behavior and gaps in security within technology. So it's not, it's kind of like the challenge with cyber is you could do all the right things from a technology standpoint, but if you're not addressing the cultural side of your business as well too, with awareness of what is good cyber hygiene, just like the client that you were working with, you could have an adverse event, right? You could just simply be fooled into giving information out that you don't want to give out, right? And so oftentimes when we're working with the customer, again, we can't just address the technology. We have to also address the cultural, the change management. We have to kind of help everybody understand almost kind of like that zero trust mentality, right? And reprogram the business and folks inside of the business to think about how they're operating a little bit differently.
Yeah. Well, it's even something as simple as time that you have to, the types of passwords you have to use, the time between changing passwords. And that's a super, in your world, that's like that's the baby, it just was born kind of example. But to some people, that's a big deal. It's a big pain in the butt. They don't like to ever have to change their passwords. Why do I have to have all these special characters, or why do I have to have two-factor authentication? Like, oh, it's the end of the world. But when you look at it, those kind of things have to be at the core of what you're doing. The basics and all the way up people have to understand.
Well, those things, they're low cost things that increase the cost to the adversary, right? And what that does, I mean, if you are working with a true persistent adversary, right? They'll get around systems, right? But for the average, the ransomware attacks, these things make a big difference. And a lot of times what we say is, the goal is to get off the Serengeti plains, right? Get back with the herd, right? Because, again, they're looking for weak links, and they're looking for the easy entry. And so, again, if you're doing basic things like good password hygiene, and you're using MFA, and you're understand all your assets, and you kind of like change all the passwords to all those assets, these things make a big difference.
Yeah. And just so people, if they're listening, don't know, MFA is multi-factor authentication. And basically, if you've ever logged in someplace and they have to text you a number to your phone, that's one method of it. There's other, all advanced all the way up to, in the old days, and they still use some of this, the banks. I'm used to, as running companies, we would always have the plug-in dongle that you had to have. Oh, yeah. That was your dongle. That nothing worked without that.
The one touch pad.
Yep.
Unikeys. These are all things that can be added to verify that you are a trusted source and that you should be accessing these systems and information inside of your business. And and again, I know some people think that these things are painful, but when you have that statistic lingering out there that 9 months later, this could mean the difference of your business being open or closed. I guess it does help kind of a little bit.
It changes the viewpoint, hopefully.
Absolutely. So
if you were in a smaller business, I mean, where would you would start with the password hygiene, but then when you started to spend money, where are you going to start to spend money on protecting yourself?
Yeah, I'd go back even a little bit, right? The first thing that I always like to say to any small business is do you understand what's important to your business? What are your crown jewels, right? What are the real things inside of your business that are so critical that those are the things you really want to protect, right? And so and sometimes when you're building your business and you're so busy getting out there and getting at it, you don't put a lot of time into that type of thinking, right? And so because everything's important, you're out there, you're wearing many different hats, but taking that time and slowing down and understanding what's important to your business, that's usually the first step that we say to any small business if you haven't done it. The next big thing that we really kind of say to people, is you got to go through and you have to understand what assets you have inside of your business. And when we say assets, we're not talking about financial assets. We're talking about the software you use, the hardware you use, those things. That's going to be interacting on your networks. It's going to be the things that the hackers are going to attack, right? And if you don't have a good picture of what's in your company, it's going to be very hard to defend it, right? And then the next big thing is do you have a good strategy around patch management, right? And patch management is so important because that is a software vendor or a hardware vendor saying, we have known vulnerabilities. We know hackers take advantage of these things, and we want to close the door on them. And so we push an update out to you, right?
Yeah.
And that update is there to make your business secure, right? And I know it seems like a pain, and I don't know if anybody has Apple iPhones. I think a few people in the world might have them. Maybe over the last week, you've noticed there's been like 6 big updates, and it's like every night you're like, I got another update. That's Apple really trying to make your phone more secure. And so, if you don't have a good process for managing how you take those assets that are in your business and keep them up to date, then it's just like leaving the windows wide open in your business. And right there with those two things right there, you haven't even spent any money. It's time you're putting against it. It's understanding, or you can go out and find experts to work with. But in the end, those two things are really, really valuable. They help you, just shut the doors. You wouldn't leave for vacation and leave your house with the windows and doors open, right?
Yeah.
The same with your software and your hardware. You got to kind of maintain those. You got to keep them locked up.
Yeah. Because, I mean, just when you look at the assets, right? You just look today, go out into a small manufacturer. I'm in 20,000, 40,000 square feet. I've got 10, 20, 50 different pieces of equipment out there.
Yep.
Some are old controls, some are new controls, some are, and then you look at all the ancillary computers in your business. You look at people that have phones or tablets, whatever connected to all this stuff. And you begin to realize that just understanding the assets that are the things that are connected, you're just the things connected to your network that can somehow be used from someone to the outside trying to get in as a portal is pretty crazy. Because you go in a manufacturing place, there's machines out there that are still trying to run Windows 10 on a computer sitting beside them that connects, with a old serial cable connection into a machine to try to feed it information. And that machine, that old computer, is connected to your internet through your system, or it could be to the internet. I don't know. I'm probably not explaining it right, but it's just like, I think about this, and that thing has no support anymore. There's nothing you can do. And so as a person, you might not have a choice because your equipment may not work with anything other than that. So there are some real challenges here, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, absolutely.
Just at that level.
Well, and then, it's other things that you don't even think about, right? It's like your Apple Watch, it's your printers, it's your mouse, it's your keyboard, your wireless keyboards. It's all these like little things that you're like, oh, that's part of the attack surface. And it is, right? And these vulnerabilities are constantly being posted. Having a strategy for it, just we say it's just so critical. And and people are not really good at it either, right? And so it's and so that's another thing. The password hygiene, that's a no-brainer. We say put MFA out there. One thing people forget to do a lot is when printers are shipped, a lot of these things have generic admin passwords. These things are on your network. You got to change the generic passwords to any hardware or software that you have, right? Like, because the first thing a hacker does is they'll look it up on the internet. They'll be like, oh, they got HP printers. Okay, what is the generic password for HP printer? Well, sometimes these things are connected to your Active Directory. Well, you're like, Active Directory, that's a big thing. It's got a lot of all your employees. It's got all your emails. It's got passwords in it. These are privileged users, right? There's these things we worry about, right? And so you got to do those things. The password management, hygiene around your passwords, get a password manager. I mean, like, they're cheap, right? They allow you to create these. I don't know any of my passwords, right?
No.
They're too complicated.
Yeah.
And so they help you. They help you do these processes, and they're inexpensive, right?
Yeah.
But when you start to spend, I mean, there are things, right? Like we are big believers of layers of defense for small businesses, right? And that's setting up a good firewall. It's putting in DNS servers that are limiting traffic through your company, right? We know where bad people are coming from. There are security experts that are monitoring these folks, and we share intel. We share threat intelligence information, and we know they're bad IP addresses. Well, stop your employees from going to them. Blacklist them. Don't have a white list of what is approved systems that employees should be on, and then stop everything else from happening. And so, there's these systems. Get your antivirus, on your email, on your computer, on your firewalls, right? These layers of defense, they'll help you when you're ready to start monitoring, to be able to identify if you have malicious activity in your company. And so, and if you're creative about this stuff, I mean, some of this stuff is incredibly expensive, right? If you go to a big OEM, they're spending millions of dollars. They have the best of breed out there, right? If you're a small business and you're trying to do what these big OEMs are doing, it's impossible, right? But there are creative ways to do this stuff. Working with experts, they'll help you understand how to digest threat intelligence. They'll help you set up appliances that will aggregate this information. And there's open source software or low cost software that they can deploy to help with this stuff.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool, because it is daunting, right? Because a lot, it's just like, it's like the unknown is almost scarier. Going into that and trying to figure out what you're going to do is almost scarier than, well, maybe it won't happen to me.
Well, and I think talking about that scary thing, it's funny because, to be an entrepreneur, you got to kind of have some pretty thick skin, you're taking on risk all day long. It's not about the scariness, right? Cybersecurity shouldn't be scary, right? There are things you do to protect your business. It's a process, right? It's just like when you're building and manufacturing, right? You start with your process, you implement it, you make some improvements on it, right? And then once it's kind of gotten to a good state, then you optimize it, right?
Yeah.
And cybersecurity is no different, right? We have processes. We approach this methodically. There's an order of go of things that you should be doing in your business, and you should be integrating this into your business, right? This is just another process, just like when you're making something that you integrate into your business, you spread it culturally across. That's why a lot of the times awareness training becomes really important with cybersecurity, because you want to culturally change your organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so, believe it or not, like good folks that are working in cybersecurity are good change management agents. We have to kind of get into the business and build it into it. So
well, because if it's not a part of what if it's just kind of a bolt on at the end, you're not going to really do nearly as much, or probably an adequate job of protecting yourself.
True.
It's got to be integrated in everything you're doing, from, like you said, we don't have Apple Watches in our facility because of this. If that's a security threat, whereas if you don't think about it, it might not be something even, that if that you don't look down to that level, that someone might do it and not even know, and they've created a vulnerability that someone exploits, and boom, boom.
Well, and so that you bring up a point about policies, right? And it's important to have policies around this stuff and be able to educate people inside of your company on why these things are. And oftentimes we're working with people to build this into their quality management processes, right?
Yeah.
And we're putting in the policies and procedures so people know what bring your own device looks like, right, inside of a company, or how do you handle media and storage, and what is appropriate use, right? While you're at work, and what software is approved, to using on company property, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing too is, and if you are worried about your company, start with the end in mind, right? And so have good recovery processes, right? That is something that I often say to people, right? Because in cybersecurity, it might not be a question of if, it's more of a thing like when, right? And so if you're putting energy and effort into what your recovery processes are, right, and how to restore, and you have a disaster recovery system, right? Even if you're a small company, you can afford a disaster recovery system. There are tools out there that, for a couple $100 can help you retrieve your data, restore systems, right? And if you're not looking at those things on the recovery, because that can make the difference of you losing your data forever or being down for a couple days.
Yeah.
Right. And so, we really have to come at cybersecurity from a lot of different angles.
Yeah. And then when you look at disaster recovery, if you even just look at, and let's face it, I'm older, and I'm coming from a time in the past, and a lot of this stuff where being in the businesses and actually in them, right, and running them and stuff, other than an advisory basis like I do now. But back in the day, you had backups, you had those kind of things and doing it. But realistically, today, even just having backups isn't good, because if you just say you're backing up for a month, and you have a backup sequence that even has once a month you do a backup, and then you have a year of that, and then you're doing daily backups for 60 days, just say, and you got 60 days of daily backups. If someone has been sitting on your network planted something the whole way through, it doesn't do you any good. I mean, I just think of stuff like that, and I'm just like, wow.
There's ways though to set up your recovery systems, right?
Okay.
So that your restore processes, right? Re-imaging machines and
Okay.
restoring email files, and it's gotten a lot better.
Good, because I sit here and think about this once in a while, and I'm like, how the heck? But I know good minds have been working on it, and that's good to know, because having people like yourself and people that are really focusing in on making it harder for the bad guys just makes me smile every day, because honestly, I think ransomware, not just being a financial suck, is really stinks. It really stinks that there are people out there that do this, and people work so hard to create good businesses, and then you see something like that happen. It's just a shame.
Well, and the bad part about ransomware, and ransomware is prolific right now. I mean, they say every 7 minutes a company has been ransomware, and
wow.
What we're hearing on the news with T-Mobile's data breach, or Colonial Pipeline, or any of this stuff, those are just the big ones, right? We're not hearing about all the little ones that are happening every day, and there can't be anything worse than all of a sudden your screen coming up and you have a flash saying, hey, your files are all encrypted and now you have to pay this ransom. And, you have like 4 days before we erase everything, or we put it on the dark web, or, whatever they're going to do. Right. And, it's just sad. Right. And so there are things though to be aware of if these things happen, right? Isolate the computer, unplug, right? Limit the damage, right? Call in experts, if you have insurance, you can get a breach code, but sometimes you want to move quicker, right? Also identify kind of what the virus is that has been deployed, and you could check these things and see if there are known remediation issues. Sometimes, as the security practitioners do have already figured out what the keys are, and so you don't have to pay the ransom. They have the keys and they can unlock it. I won't say that's a lot, but you
never know.
You never know. And if that's not the case, then you got to escalate through these things, right?
Yeah.
So
wow, that's that is just see the big companies that get hit by it, and you realize that's just the tip of the iceberg is pretty scary.
Yeah, it for sure is an interesting space.
Yeah. So you mentioned something about the danger of end of life systems. What? We touched on a little bit with Windows 7 computer in the corner that's attached to something, but what are you talking about, the dangers of end of life systems?
Yeah, so the challenge with end of life systems is it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get hacked, right? But the problem with end of life systems, it goes back to that patch management strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what an end of life system means is that it's now become a non-supported piece of hardware or software, right? What means there are never going to be any more patches for that software. And so, the community that wants to that has malicious intent, or they gang up on these type of systems because they know companies aren't going to support them, but they know they're inside of companies, right? And so they find methods to breach these systems, and because again, the company that is no longer going to support it, there's never going to be a system to fix it. And so if you have a Windows 7 machine, I could look right now on the internet. I could find tons of strategies to breach these systems. There's paid ones, so you don't even have to be technical. You could pay a couple bucks and somebody will give you the tool that will breach that system, right?
My goodness.
And so that's why, having a good strategy on managing your assets, figuring out what your capital expenses are and building that in and forecasting that to replace these systems. That's why it's important, because again, there's just no solution for an end of life system, and that includes a lot of times we see people using old servers, right? And it's like, when you start a business, you're trying to pinch every penny, right? And you're like, hey, I got this server and we need a place to store stuff, so let's use it, right? And then you start getting bigger and more successful, and there's other problems throughout your day. You got to try to find employees to work your machinery, or you're negotiating with your suppliers and trying to get your goods of materials, the cost down, right? You forget that old server's just out there, right? And you're throwing more stuff on it and more stuff on it, and days just keep going by, right? And then again, it's just out there, right? That door never gets closed. So it happens, but it's something to be aware of.
Well, we were talking earlier, you've been working on some software that's kind of interesting that helps you visualize supply chain risk. Can you talk a little bit about that? I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, well, I think what we're working on, is it's the concept of, everything's becoming interconnected, right? And the data is out there to see these vulnerabilities and kind of identify where risk is, right? As security experts, we're always trying to mitigate the risk. We're always trying to raise the cost of adversaries. So, and the tenets of security don't change, right? And so when you want to see, if you're a larger company, right, you want to see kind of where that risk is, even beyond your walls. And so we're working on ways to help the small company, flow up what they're doing, and the big companies to receive it so that they can see what that risk is, right? And then we also want to support the workflows to really help build a good security program around that. And, a lot of what this software will do, it will help discover your assets. It will help with that patch management strategy. It'll show the controls and how you start to put the controls in place so that you can feel better about your business, and knowing that you're putting rigor and discipline in place around cybersecurity, and really try to reduce that footprint and risk. But then have a reporting system that shares what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is when you start to think about some, I even just say I'm making, the best bicycle in the world with the greatest IP and all the other kinds of crazy. Just say it's just some just radical design that everybody wants to get their hands on, and I'm making this bicycle. Your overall cybersecurity risk is the least secure piece in that link in your supply chain.
Absolutely. And again, going to the hacker mindset is, not necessarily to work hard, right? It's to find some of these least paths of resistance. And, for all this information technology systems, for all these bots and systems that we're automating, right? They do a lot of good in the world. They're also being used to do bad. So, it's automating the process of discoveries and finding things, and bots are, constantly surfing and pinging up against things. So, it changes the game a little bit.
Yeah.
Yep.
It certainly does. It certainly does, because it is. So that's pretty cool, because I'm sitting here thinking about it. So I'm Damon. I'm making I decided I've got my new electric car company that I've formed, and I want to make sure my supply chain is solid from a cybersecurity standpoint. If I could, if all my suppliers' cybersecurity information would flow up through to me, so we can look at the entire supply chain, that would really be something.
Yeah, and that's what we're working on, right? Is to really kind of, again, like I said, the data is already out there. It's how do you start to put it together and visualize it so you can see it in new ways, right? And that's what we're helping organizations do. And again, in some industries it's being regulated, right? You go into the defense industrial base, right? You work for a company that's building a next generation airplane system, or we have our commercial space and federal space programs, right, that are all converging together. And just think of how many companies help support these systems, right?
Yeah. I mean, you just look at just two names, SpaceX and NASA, how they work together, and how something like that would be just so hard to fathom in one little piece of one little subunit, how many just trinkets come from all over the world, from a gazillion different suppliers, to come together to make this work. And you are at the mercy of the least secure one of them all.
That's it. And and some are embedded into critical processes, right? To keep these things moving. And so that's why I think you're seeing things like CMMC come up, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not familiar with that, it's a program that the DoD has created. It's really to help kind of, raise everybody's capability around cybersecurity so that they can have a higher confidence. And if you're working with the DoD, you're going to have to hit these standards. And that standard, isn't just for the prime contractor. It's also for all of the other people underneath of them too. And so these things are going to, for some industries, not be a nice to have anymore.
You make a great point. We hear a lot of people talk about CMMC, and I know NIST is doing a big push on it now to try to. There's a training around it, just in the thought and the talk around it. It's pretty. That's going to be pretty significant. And when is it that people have to be compliant with it?
Yeah, so there's good and bad with what's happening with CMMC right now. They're a little bit behind schedule. That's causing some fragmentation, right? Because everybody's trying to prepare for it, but I think 90%, 95% of it's already kind of solidified at this point, and we kind of know what's going to be coming, and it's going to be rolling out over the next 5 years, right? So that's the thing right now. It hasn't officially come out. They're a little bit behind. They're 8-9 months behind where they thought they were going to be for the initial rollout. And but it's coming. And if it's not CMMC, it's going to be
something else.
It'll be another standard. And a lot of times, what we're saying to folks, if you're following NIST and you're following NIST 171 and you're following 172, and you're going to be in pretty good shape and be prepared
Okay.
for CMMC, right?
Yeah.
And because all these frameworks, they build off of one another. Sometimes it's the order of goes a little bit different. Maybe they're mixing technology and the physical world, and like they want to be concerned about earthquakes and are you in flood zones, and they mix some of this stuff up a little bit. But in general, the tenets of security don't change.
Yeah. I just had to giggle a little bit. You're saying I have to make some of it up. Yeah, that's funny, but it's true. It's true.
Well, and that's why, again, we like going back to your crown jewels, right? What is really important to your business, right? And it should be independent of the frameworks out there. These frameworks are great for communicating what you're doing, but build a program to secure your what's really truly important to you, right?
Yeah.
And it shouldn't only be tied to Damon, it's not. We see this sometimes, right? There's a check the box. I think we've seen this with ISO, right?
Yeah,
To help improve quality. When you have audits and stuff like that, some people are like, we just got to get through it, right? But with cyber, getting through it could have negative impacts if you don't secure your business. Again, so it's priorities. We know it's hard for people. It's kind of like a roof. Nobody really like putting a roof on their house. They'd rather have that nice granite in your kitchen, but have a rainy season and have a bad roof, right?
Yeah.
And you find that money is really well spent.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, we had David commenting. He said, it's amazing to think about your risk from this perspective. And I'd have to agree. It's when you start to think about the amount and the ways that people can come in and do bad things, it is a little bit daunting, but
well, and that's why we go back to simplify it, right?
Yeah.
You do some of these basic things, get your foundation in order, right? Just like what you're doing in manufacturing, you just didn't go out and become a completely efficient machine and everything. You start somewhere, you get that foundation built, then you go back and you optimize it. And optimization usually is like you're putting your policies and procedures in, you're doing training with your employees and you're helping educate, right? And then you afterwards, after you've done that, you want to really optimize it, right? And when we say that your disaster recovery is completely locked in, right? You've running exercises, people are able to know what needs to happen if things have happened, right? You're also maybe doing some more advanced things like monitoring log files that come out of your systems, out of your email, out of your file management. You're monitoring network traffic, and maybe you're using partners to help that, or maybe you're at this point in your company where you're big enough and you're starting to build your own little system to do these things. And so it's interesting to watch as businesses evolve and they get larger and how they build these things. So
I bet. I was just writing down, disaster recovery exercises, man. And it is, I mean, you have to practice. It's like doing fire drills. You gotta do it until you understand it.
And these exercises can be as complicated as like replicated sandboxes with IT systems, or as simple as just a card exercise. Hey, this computer has a ransomware. What do you do? Who do you call? What are the, and you just walk through these things, right? And it's like, and then you're like, well, David fixes that. Well, David left 3 months ago. Well, who does it now?
Well, that's a great and a very simple example that every business should be able to do is like, what happens? What happens in this? And it's really simple.
All right.
that makes me feel a lot better. I mean, because when it can be daunting, but when you go back and talk about, like you said, the basics, understanding your true value, most valuable assets, do good patch management and good password hygiene, and maybe use multi-factor authentication, that's gonna move you up the chain as far as how easy it is to get in, at least, and maybe get you going down.
We call that raise the cost of the adversary. Make it a little bit hard. Put some speed bumps in the way. Close the doors. Lock the windows. I mean, like Damon, how hard is it to knock out
break
knock
a
a
window and go
window,
in
right?
anyway.
Like,
Yeah.
But just the simple fact that a window is sometimes locked, right? You're closed your ports. You don't have too many things on you got all the dead weight systems and old legacy stuff off your network. So it's cleaning your house, right? It's and you do this on your plant floors, right?
Yeah.
You go through your business, you got to treat your IT systems, you got to treat your data, you got to treat your crown jewels the same way.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Bill, it's been awesome talking to you, man, because it's just, you're a wealth of knowledge in this. And I know that, you've seen the bad, and the road rash is there, and it's you come out alive. So that's good.
Well,
But,
we've seen the good too. And, there are people doing some amazing stuff out there, and a lot of people there to help too.
Yeah.
So, and I have to say, Damon, thank you very much. This has been awesome. I enjoyed talking with you, and it's an amazing thing that you do for your community here with the face of business, and just good stuff. I'm happy to be here.
Well, thanks so much for being here again. We got Bill Palifka from. Can I say the name of your company so I know it right?
Cymonix.
Cymonix.
Yeah.
Cymonix. There we go. I said
there
it right.
It is.
Thanks so much for being here, Bill. If someone wants to get a hold of you, is reaching out on LinkedIn a good way to get a hold of you?
Absolutely. And
all right.
And any of your friends and contacts, if they reach out to you, I'll make sure you have my contact info too. So
all right. Thanks everyone for listening today. Thanks, Bill, for being here. We are actually going to take a break. I'm not going to be on next week because I've got some family in town, and we're going to spend a little time together, but we will be back after that with more fun guests talking about different things around business and life and technology. So